The fire died without warning. No wind had touched it. We sat in darkness and listened to something breathe on the far side of our stacked gear. The sound was wet and slow. When the moon rose, we saw the prints. Each one sank 4 inches deep into hard ground. I still remember the smell of pine sap on my hands that spring in 1851, and the way my back felt after 10 hours bent over a sluice box. We were working a stretch of the South Yuba, where the water ran clear and the bedrock showed colors that kept us digging. There were 5 of us at the start. Thomas Ridley came from Missouri with a wagon and 3 mules. He had a wide face and steady hands and knew how to read water better than any man I met in those mountains. Samuel Cole was a printer from Boston who had left his wife and 2 children to chase gold. He carried a small daguerreotype of them in a leather case and looked at it each night before sleeping. James Kern was from Pennsylvania, barely 20 years old, with calluses already thick from farm work. He spoke little and worked hard. Henry Walsh was older, maybe 50, with gray in his beard and scars on his knuckles. He had mined silver in Mexico before coming north. I kept the accounts and handled the scales. My name is not important now. We had been working the claim for 3 weeks when Ridley found the first real color. It was early morning, and the sun had not yet cleared the ridge. He called us over to his pan without lifting his head. We crowded around and looked down at the fine threads of gold caught in the black sand. They gleamed even in the weak light. No one spoke for a long moment. Then Walsh broke the silence by asking how much Ridley thought lay in the bed. Ridley said he would need to dig deeper to know, but that the signs were good. We set to work with renewed energy. The claim sat in a bend of the South Yuba River, where the current slowed and dropped its load. The canyon walls rose steep on both sides and left only a narrow strip of flat ground along the bank. Ponderosa pine and sugar pine grew thick wherever soil held. Granite boulders the size of wagons lay scattered where ancient floods had left them. The water ran cold and clear over bedrock that showed rust-colored stains in places. Those stains meant iron, and iron often ran with gold. Our camp was simple: 2 canvas tents set back from the water under a large pine, a fire ring of stacked stones, a lean-to for tools and supplies covered with a tarp. We kept our food in a wooden crate hung from a high branch to keep it from bears. We had seen bear sign often. Tracks along the muddy margins, claw marks on tree bark, scat full of berry seeds. The local Maidu people had warned us about bears when we passed through their fishing camp downstream. They said the bears in these mountains grew large and bold. We believed them, but did not worry. We had guns and noise and fire. The work was hard, and the days were long. We woke before dawn and ate a cold meal of yesterday's bread and dried meat. Then we walked down to the river and began digging. The tools were simple: picks to break the ground, shovels to move the dirt, pans to wash the lighter material away and leave the heavy gold behind. Sometimes we used a sluice box, a long wooden trough with ridges along the bottom to catch the gold as water flowed through. The work destroyed hands. Blisters formed and broke and formed again until the skin grew thick. Backs ached from bending. Knees stiffened from kneeling in cold water. But when the pan showed color, the pain did not matter. By the end of the first month, we had collected nearly 8 ounces of gold. It sat in a leather pouch that Ridley kept in his tent. We took turns guarding it at night. The canyon was remote but not empty. Other prospectors worked claims upstream and downstream. Some were honest, some were not. A man could lose his gold or his life over a careless moment. We trusted each other, but no one else. The second month brought more gold and stranger signs. We found tracks near camp that were larger than any bear prints we had seen. They measured 14 inches long and 8 inches wide, with claw marks that gouged the dirt. Walsh said they belonged to a grizzly, that the bears in California grew bigger than those in Mexico. Ridley agreed, but looked uneasy. The tracks circled our camp in a wide loop and stopped near the lean-to where we kept the tools. Nothing had been disturbed. Nothing had been taken. The bear, if it was a bear, had only looked. 2 days later, Cole found a deer carcass in the brush upstream. It lay on its side with the rib cage cracked open and the organs gone. The kill was fresh. Flies had not yet gathered in numbers. What troubled us was the method. The deer had not been chased down and torn apart in the usual way. Its neck was intact. Its legs were unbroken. Something had simply crushed its chest and fed there without moving the body. The ground around it showed the same large tracks. Walsh suggested we move camp. Ridley said we had too much invested to leave over a dead deer. We stayed. That night, the fire went out. I was on watch with Kern. We had built the fire high and fed it dry pine that burned hot and bright. There was no wind. The air was still. Yet the flames died in a matter of seconds, as if smothered by a heavy blanket. We sat in complete darkness and did not move. Then we heard it. A slow, wet breathing from the far side of our stacked gear. The sound was deep and deliberate. It came in long pulls and slow releases. Whatever made it was large. Kern reached for his rifle in the dark. I heard the wood creak as he lifted it. I did the same. We did not speak. We did not want to give away our positions. The breathing continued for perhaps a minute. Then it stopped. We waited. The silence felt heavier than the sound had been. When the moon finally rose above the canyon rim, it cast enough light to see by. We found the prints. They led from the forest edge to within 10 feet of where we sat. Each print was pressed 4 inches deep into ground that had been baked hard by the sun. The creature had stood there and watched us in the dark. Then it had left without a sound. At first light, we examined the tracks more carefully. They were not like any bear prints we knew. The claws were longer and the pad was narrower. The stride was enormous. Walsh measured it at over 6 feet between prints. He said nothing after he finished measuring. He only looked at Ridley. Ridley asked what we should do. Cole said we should leave. Kern said we should set a watch with 2 men awake at all times. I said we should move the gold to a different location, away from camp. We argued for an hour and reached no agreement. In the end, we decided to stay, but to double the watch and keep the fire burning all night. The gold kept coming. Ridley hit a pocket near the bedrock that yielded half an ounce in a single pan. We worked that spot for 3 days and pulled out nearly 4 ounces total. The leather pouch grew heavy. Our spirits lifted despite the unease that settled over camp each evening. Gold has a way of making men ignore danger. We told ourselves the creature was only a bear. We told ourselves it would lose interest and move on. We were wrong. Walsh was the first to show the mark. He woke one morning with deep scratches on his forearm. 3 parallel lines that wept clear fluid. He said he must have scraped himself on a rock while working, but the cuts were too clean and too evenly spaced. They looked deliberate. Ridley asked if Walsh had gone into the forest during the night. Walsh said he had not. He had stayed in his tent the entire time. No one pressed him further. We cleaned the wound with whiskey, and wrapped it with a strip of cloth. By evening, the skins around the cuts had turned dark and swollen. Walsh developed a fever. He lay in his tent and sweated through his blanket. We gave him water and kept him cool. By the next morning, the fever had broken. The cuts looked better. Walsh said he felt weak but could work. We let him rest another day. While Walsh recovered, the rest of us continued digging. The gold pocket had not played out. We found more color every day. The pouch was now too heavy to carry comfortably. Ridley began talking about taking the gold downstream to the supply camp and converting it to coin. He said we should do it soon before word spread, and someone decided to follow us back. We agreed. We would finish the week and then make the trip. That night, something took our food. We had hung the crate 10 feet off the ground on a sturdy branch. The rope was thick and the knot was solid. In the morning, we found the crate on the ground with the lid torn off. Everything inside was gone. Flour, dried meat, beans, coffee. Even the salt pork we had wrapped in cloth. The crate itself was crushed as if stepped on by something very heavy. The rope had not been chewed or cut. It had been snapped. We found no tracks near the tree. The ground was too rocky. But we knew what had taken it. We now had a problem. The nearest supply camp was 8 miles downstream. We could reach it in a day if we moved fast, but that meant leaving the claim unguarded, and it meant carrying the gold with us through country we did not know well. Ridley suggested we send 2 men for supplies, while 3 stayed to guard the claim and continue working. Cole volunteered to go. Kern said he would go with him. They left at first light with rifles and a mule to carry the supplies back. Cole and Kern did not return that night. We told ourselves they had decided to stay at the supply camp and start back in the morning. It made sense. The trail was rough and it would be dangerous to travel in the dark. But when the second night passed with no sign of them, we grew worried. On the 3rd morning, Ridley said he would go look for them. Walsh said he would go too. His arm had healed and his strength had returned. I stayed at the camp alone with instructions to fire 3 shots if anything happened. I spent that day working the sluice box and listening to the forest. Every crack of a branch made me turn. Every bird call sounded like a warning. The sun moved slowly across the sky. Shadows lengthened. I kept the rifle within reach and looked upstream often. By late afternoon, I began to wonder if I should abandon the camp and follow the others. But I had been told to stay, and the gold was still here. As dusk settled, I built the fire high. I stacked wood nearby so I would not have to leave the light to get more. I loaded both rifles and set them across my knees. I did not plan to sleep. The forest grew dark and the sounds changed. The daytime birds went silent. Insects began their evening chorus. Somewhere downstream, a great horned owl called. The fire crackled and popped. I fed it steadily and watched the tree line. Around midnight, I heard movement upstream. It was not the sound of men walking. It was something heavy pushing through brush. I stood and raised the rifle. The sound stopped. I waited. Then I heard it again, closer this time. I called out and asked who was there. No answer came. I fired a shot into the air. The sound echoed off the canyon walls and faded. Silence returned. I reloaded and listened. Nothing moved for the rest of the night. At dawn, I walked upstream to look for tracks. I found them easily. The same large prints we had seen before. They followed the river for 100 yards and then turned into the forest. I did not follow. I returned to camp and waited. By midday, I heard voices. Ridley and Walsh appeared on the trail. They were alone. They looked exhausted. Ridley told me what they had found. Cole and Kern had made it 4 miles downstream before something attacked them. The mule was dead, its neck broken and its body partially eaten. Cole's rifle lay nearby, fired once. There was blood on the rocks and drag marks leading into dense brush. They had followed the marks as far as they dared, but found nothing. No bodies, no sign of a struggle beyond the initial attack site. Just blood and tracks. Walsh said the tracks were the same as those we had seen at camp, but there was something else. At the attack site, they found pieces of cloth and a broken leather strap. The strap had belonged to Cole's pack. The cloth was from Kern's shirt. Whatever had taken them had not eaten them on the spot. It had carried them away. We stood by the fire and did not speak for a long time. Finally, Ridley said we should leave immediately. Take the gold and go, Walsh agreed. I asked if we should try to find Cole and Kern. Ridley said there was nothing to find. They were dead. We could not help them. We could only save ourselves. We packed quickly. Ridley put the gold in a canvas sack and tied it to his belt. We took only what we could carry. Rifles, ammunition, blankets, water. We left the tents and the tools and the sluice box. We left everything that had weight. We started downstream at a fast walk. The trail was narrow and rough. We stayed close together and kept our rifles ready. We made it 2 miles before we saw it. It stood in the middle of the trail ahead, blocking our path. At first, I thought it was a bear. It had the general shape of a bear. But as we drew closer, I saw the differences. It was taller, perhaps 12 feet when it rose on its hind legs. Its face was longer and flatter than a grizzly's. Its shoulders were broader. Its front limbs were thick with muscle and ended in claws that looked like iron hooks. The fur was dark brown and matted. Scars crisscrossed its chest and neck. Old wounds that had healed into thick ridges. This was not a young animal. This was something that had survived for a very long time. It looked at us without moving. Its eyes were small and dark and showed no fear. It breathed slowly through its nose. The sound was the same wet breathing we had heard at camp. It did not growl or make any threat display. It simply stood and watched. Ridley raised his rifle. Walsh did the same. I kept mine aimed at the creature's chest. We stood perhaps 50 feet apart. The trail was too narrow to go around. The brush on either side was too thick to push through quickly. We had no choice but to face it. Ridley fired first. The shot hit the creature in the shoulder. It flinched, but did not fall. Walsh fired next. His shot struck higher, near the neck. The creature shook its head and took a step forward. I fired. My shot went wide and hit a tree behind it. The creature dropped to all fours and charged. It covered the distance in seconds. We scattered. Ridley dove left into the brush. Walsh went right. I dropped flat and rolled. The creature passed over me so close I felt its fur brush my back. It smelled of rot and old blood. It stopped and turned. Its movements were fast despite its size. It fixed its eyes on Walsh. He was trying to reload. His hands shook. The creature lunged. Walsh screamed once. The sound was cut short. I heard bones crack. I scrambled to my feet and ran. I did not look back. I heard Ridley crashing through the brush somewhere to my left. I did not see him. I only ran. The trail twisted and dropped. I slipped on loose rocks and caught myself. My lungs burned. My legs felt weak. I ran until I could not run anymore. Then I collapsed behind a boulder and listened. The forest was quiet. No birds, no insects, Nothing. I lay there and tried to control my breathing. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would break through my ribs. I waited for the sound of pursuit. It did not come. After what felt like an hour but was probably only minutes, I heard something moving downstream. It was slow and deliberate. Not running. Walking. I pressed myself against the boulder and did not breathe. The sound passed. It continued downstream and faded. I waited longer. The sun dropped lower. Shadows filled the canyon. I knew I could not stay here. I had to move. But which way? Downstream led toward the supply camp, but also toward the creature. Upstream led back to our abandoned camp. I chose upstream. I would circle around through the forest and try to find another route down. I moved carefully. Each step was placed with thought. I tested the ground before putting my weight down. I avoided dry branches. I kept to soft soil where my boots made no sound. The forest was thick. Manzanita and live oak grew in tangles. I pushed through slowly. My clothes caught on thorns, my face got scratched. I ignored the pain and kept moving. As darkness settled, I found a dense thicket and crawled inside. The branches formed a low canopy that hid me from above. I lay on my stomach and watched the gaps in the brush. I did not sleep. I listened. The night sounds returned slowly. First the insects, then the frogs near the river, then an owl. The forest was waking up now that the creature had moved on. I thought about the others. Cole and Kern were certainly dead. Walsh was dead. I had seen it happen. Ridley might be alive. He had gone into the brush. He might have escaped. Or he might be lying injured somewhere in the dark. I wanted to call out, but did not dare. Any sound could bring the creature back. The night passed slowly. I counted my breaths to keep track of time. I counted to 100, and then started over. I did this many times. My body ached from lying still. My throat was dry. I had no water. I had dropped my canteen when I ran. All I had was the rifle and the ammunition in my pockets. No food, no blanket, no knife. If I did not reach the supply camp soon, I would die out here even without the creature. At first light, I crawled out of the thicket. My muscles were stiff. My hands were numb. I stood slowly and listened. The forest was quiet but not silent. Birds called. A squirrel chattered somewhere above. These were good signs. Animals went quiet when a predator was near. I started moving again. I worked, my way up slope, away from the river. The ground was steep and covered with loose granite chips that shifted under my boots. I climbed carefully. After an hour, I reached a ridgeline that ran parallel to the canyon. From here, I could see the river below and the trail we had used. I could also see our camp, or what was left of it. The tents were torn down. The gear was scattered. Smoke no longer rose from the fire pit. I stayed on the ridge and moved downstream. The going was easier here. The trees were more spread out, and the ground was more stable. I made good time. By midday, I could see the supply camp in the distance. It sat in a wider part of the canyon, where the river slowed and formed a small meadow. I counted 10 tents and several wooden structures. People moved between them. I felt a surge of relief so strong it made my legs weak. I descended carefully. The slope was steep, and I did not want to fall now. I reached the trail and followed it the last mile into camp. Men looked at me as I entered. I must have looked wild. My clothes were torn. My face was scratched and dirty. I carried the rifle like a man who expected to use it. Someone asked if I was all right. I said I needed to speak to whoever was in charge. They brought me to a man named Patterson, who ran the supply store. He was a thick-built man with a gray beard and sharp eyes. He sat me down and gave me water. I drank the whole cup. He refilled it, and I drank again. Then I told him everything: the claim, the gold, the tracks, the killings, the creature. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked if I had been drinking. I said no. He asked if I had a fever. I said no. He looked at me for a long moment and then nodded. Patterson said others had reported strange things in the mountains: missing livestock, torn camps, tracks that did not match any known animal. Most people dismissed these reports as bear attacks or lies told by men who wanted attention. But Patterson had lived in these mountains for 5 years. He had seen things that did not fit easy explanations. He believed me. He asked if I knew where Ridley was. I said I did not know if he was alive. Patterson organized a search party. 6 men with rifles and dogs. I went with them. We followed the trail back upstream. The dogs picked up a scent quickly. They pulled hard on their leads and bayed as they ran. We followed at a jog. We found Ridley 3 miles up. He was alive. He had climbed a tall pine and wedged himself into the branches 20 feet off the ground. He had stayed there all night. He was dehydrated and exhausted, but uninjured. We helped him down and gave him water. He did not speak much. His eyes looked distant. We continued to the attack site. The mule was still there, now bloated and crawling with flies. We found Walsh nearby. What was left of him? The creature had fed and then abandoned the body. We wrapped him in a blanket and carried him back. We did not find Cole or Kern. The search party said it was too dangerous to go deeper into the forest. We returned to the supply camp. Patterson asked what we wanted to do. Ridley said we should report the deaths to the authorities. Patterson said the nearest law was in Nevada City, 3 days' ride. He said by the time anyone came to investigate, the trail would be cold. He suggested we gather more men and hunt the creature ourselves. Kill it before it killed others. Ridley refused. He said he was done with these mountains. He wanted to leave and never come back. I felt the same. We had lost 3 men. We had lost our gear. The gold we carried was not worth the cost. Patterson tried to convince us to stay and help with the hunt. We refused. He did not push further. We left the next morning. Ridley and I walked together without speaking. We followed the main trail west toward Sacramento. We did not look back. Behind us, the mountains rose dark and silent. Somewhere in those mountains, the creature still lived. I knew it would kill again, but I also knew I would not be there to see it. We reached Sacramento 2 weeks later. Ridley sold the gold and split the money between us. It came to $400 each, less than we had hoped, more than we deserved. We shook hands and parted ways. I never saw him again. I am 73 years old now. I have not returned to the Sierra Nevada foothills since that spring in 1851. Thomas Ridley died of consumption in San Francisco in 1858. I read about it in a newspaper. The Yuba River claim was never worked again. Local Maidu still tell stories about a bear that walks like a man and hunts those who take gold from the earth. I kept a small nugget from our last pan. Sometimes I hold it and wonder if the creature is still there, waiting in the canyon where the water runs cold and the bedrock shows colors that keep men digging. I know what hunted us in those mountains, and I know it let me leave. If this account from 1851 gave you chills, please leave a like and help others discover these forgotten encounters. Subscribe to Dust and Bones for more historical horror stories from miners, sailors, soldiers, and explorers who faced the unknown. Drop a comment and let us know where you are watching from. Next time, we journey to the Appalachian Mountains, where railroad workers, drilling through solid rock, encountered something that should have stayed buried. You will not want to miss it. Until then, stay curious, and remember that history holds more than we are taught.